I genuinely think that we're about to see one of the coolest fights in Jujutsu Kaisen as a whole, because not only are we about to get another fight between somebody in Kenjaku, who is one of the strongest sorcerers in the series, but the person fighting Kenjaku is the biggest wild card I've seen in recent manga. Fumihiko Takaba has a curse technique that is called Comedian. Whenever he comes up with something that he's certain will be funny, it becomes reality. And it's even said that this curse technique is capable of opposing Satoru Gojo. But the thing is, Takaba doesn't even know that he has this curse technique. Takaba himself is just a failed comedian. And the big reason why he doesn't even know he has this curse technique is because Kenjaku just gave these people who were normal people curse techniques out of nowhere. We see that whenever Kenjaku was fighting against the high school and he ended up talking to Yuki, he says that there were two types of sorcerers that would come into the Culling Games. One are the reincarnated sorcerers that were brought from the past, and the other type were sorcerers who were already just around and living normal people, but he gave them the ability to wield curse techniques. We see that whenever he's talking to Takaba in this recent chapter, he says that he doesn't actually have any interest for these awakened sorcerers, the people who were just normal beforehand. The only person he does have interest in is Higuruma. And this is sort of an excuse to why Takaba doesn't know he has a curse technique. He just sort of woke up one day with one. But it is pretty easy to deduce you have a curse technique if you're pretty smart, which is how Higuruma does it. And not to be too mean to Takaba, but he doesn't seem like the smartest guy. But it actually is probably better off that he doesn't even know what his curse technique is, because his curse technique revolves around something that needs to be genuine, which is finding something funny. And now his opponent is Kenjaku. And at first you might think that, well, you know, it is Kenjaku. Takaba is pretty screwed, but I wouldn't just say Takaba's screwed yet. I definitely don't think he's dying in this fight. If anything, the worst I see it going is Takaba begins to get beaten up, but then help arrives. But I have a reason for believing that Takaba will last long in this fight with Kenjaku. And it comes down to how Kenjaku's two main curse techniques that he uses while fighting will interact with Takaba's body. And before I get into detail about how I think this fight will go, I do want to say that I'm saving domain expansions for last. So everything I'm going to cover is what's going to happen outside of a domain expansion. And towards the end, I'll talk about what will probably happen if Kenjaku decides to open up his domain or not. So at the end of the recent chapter, we saw that Kenjaku threw some curses towards Takaba, just expecting these curses to just destroy him in one hit, because it didn't seem like Kenjaku was taking Takaba seriously at all. Now, the reason that Kenjaku's face looks so surprised is because the attack that he launched at Takaba did 0 damage. And when Kenjaku says that it wasn't that his attack didn't work, it was forced into not working, all this means is that, yes, his curse technique was launched at Takaba. The force and power of the technique was also launched at Takaba. So the technique was working perfectly fine. But when it came into contact with Takaba's body, he took no damage because of his curse technique. And this isn't the first time that we've seen Takaba use his curse technique to take no damage. We see in chapter 168, whenever Hazanoki launches a blast at Megami, the reason the attack does no damage to Takaba when he intervenes is because look at what Takaba says before the attack hits him. You're a coward and cowardly attacks don't work. So through his curse technique, when he says that the cowardly attack does not work, he literally means that the attack will not work at all. It seems like any other sorcerer who would say this, it would just be sort of a figure of speech. Like if Gojo was fighting Hazanoki and said your attacks won't work, he's not literally saying that Hazanoki's attacks won't work at all. He's just saying that his attacks would be nullified by Gojo's own abilities. But in Takaba's case, he literally means that Hazanoki's attack won't work. And right after Takaba says this, he says 0 damage with a smile on his face, which means he's taken no damage from the attack. And one thing about Takaba that goes overlooked by almost every post I've seen about him is that the reason he wears the costume that he does is because it's based on the superhero who first got him to laugh his guts out. And Takaba even says that while he's wearing this costume, he's gotta knock him dead. Now, the thing about these words is, when he's saying he's gotta knock him dead, he's meaning in a funny sense. He's meaning about entertaining a crowd and having jokes that are so funny he figuratively knocks them dead. But the thing we know about Takaba is that he takes things that should be figurative and makes them reality. So I think that Gege has purposely said the words "he's gotta knock him dead" here as a way to say that he will actually knock his opponent dead, but also play into the comedian role that he has, where he will make jokes that are also extremely funny. And although he doesn't know his own curse technique, the reason he wears this outfit is a little bit of insight to tell us he will always try his hardest in a fight when he's wearing this outfit, because he doesn't want to let the person down who is his idol, which is the reason he's wearing the outfit in the first place. Which is why it says that his curse technique is capable of opposing Satoru Gojo, because while wearing this outfit, he would be extremely determined to make a good showcase, which is making things funny, but he is also extremely determined to win the fight he's in. And since his curse technique is things that he finds funny happening, since he is trying to be as funny as possible while also trying to win a fight, it will be extremely hard or near impossible to defeat him. We also see in chapter 173, whenever Takaba is fighting against Hazanoki again, Hazanoki tries to hit him with a bomb, but it doesn't work, and whenever Hazanoki goes to punch Takaba, Takaba calls himself a tough bugger and just completely tanks the punch. It doesn't move him in the slightest. We even see when Hazanoki is thinking to himself, he says, seriously, what's with this guy? With how many times I've bombed him, he should be dead 5 times over by now. So why is there so little damage? And his first wounds have already healed, but I don't think he's used a reverse curse technique like me. I don't get it. So we see at first that Takaba was able to take no damage from an attack because he called himself a tough bugger, and then we see that Hazanoki says that Takaba should have been dead 5 times over, but he's still alive, and there's been little damage, and the first wounds that Takaba received have already been healed. You see, the reason it was so hard for Hazanoki to fight against Takaba is because he doesn't know what his curse technique is, and neither does Kenjaku. At first I thought it would make sense that Kenjaku knew the curse technique that Takaba did, since Kenjaku is the one who gave Takaba his curse technique along with the other awakened sorcerers like Higuruma. But Kenjaku's initial reaction to Takaba not taking any damage from his attack leads me to believe that he has no idea what Takaba's curse technique is, because even though the narrator says that Takaba's curse technique is capable of opposing Gojo, it seems like Kenjaku has no idea about this. If Kenjaku knew that Takaba was able to oppose Gojo, or able to take no damage from attacks, and was able to just do anything he found funny, Kenjaku wouldn't have been surprised with what happened to his attack when he launched it at him. And although it's stated that the 6 eyes can see through curse techniques, Kenjaku has nothing like this. So he's not going to be able to see through whatever Takaba is doing. He's just going to be fighting somebody just like Hazanoki was, who doesn't take damage from attacks and continues to do random things that he finds funny, which is one of the things that would catch Kenjaku the most off guard. There isn't a consistency to things that Takaba finds funny. He finds any random thing funny and it just begins to happen. Which is the main reason I don't think that curse manipulation or even Kenjaku's gravity technique will be enough to take out Takaba. Because although Takaba doesn't use reverse curse technique, and from all of the pages that we've seen him heal from attacks, it doesn't seem like Takaba is purposefully finding it funny to heal. It seems like it's more of a byproduct of Takaba wanting to perform at his best. Because think about it, if he's damaged from an attack and then he says that he wants to perform at his best, he would, byproduct of wanting to perform at his best, heal from the attack. But it's not like healing from the attack was the main objective. He was just able to heal because he wanted to perform at his best, and we know that the main thing Takaba wants to do is make people laugh and perform. And it's funny because even though Kenjaku is Kenjaku, he's actually pissed Takaba off at the start of this fight. We see Takaba say, "Hey you monk, are you trying to kill me? That's it, the gloves are off, no more Mr. Nice Guy." So we see here that any chance of Takaba starting the fight off slow or being nice, he's just said here that all of that is thrown out of the window. Takaba is now no longer going to be Mr. Nice Guy and the gloves are coming off. And I want you to think real quick why Takaba saying this would actually be very worrisome for Kenjaku. Because in all of Takaba's past fights, he never really had the full drive to just devour his opponent. We even saw when he was fighting against Hazanoki in chapter 173, the moment Hazanoki found out that Reggie died, Hazanoki just wanted to leave. He said, "Oh, well, I have no reason to fight anymore, I'm just gonna go home." And Takaba just said, oh, well, sure. Takaba didn't even have the drive to crush Hazanoki. He was just doing it because he wanted to perform. Now think back to this Kenjaku example. Right now, Takaba has actually shown that he wants to crush Kenjaku. I won't say that he's in a fit of rage or anything, but he is quite literally saying the gloves are off and there's no more Mr. Nice Guy. So we see that Takaba here has actually sought out Kenjaku to fight and beat him. In his past fight, he didn't even have the drive to crush an opponent, but it seems like in this fight he does, which means that we are now about to see a rare form Takaba even stronger than what he was doing before. And what he was doing before was healing from attacks and taking no damage from them in the first place. So in this fight with Kenjaku, you can only imagine he'd do this and much more. Which means now we need to talk about if there is an upper limit to Takaba's ability in relation to how much damage he can take from an attack. And what I mean by this is, remember that Awasaka guy that Yuji and Megami fought? Even though his technique would allow big attacks to do little damage and little attacks to do big damage, there was a limit. For example, even though Awasaka would get hit by a big attack and it wouldn't hurt him at all, if he got hit by a purple, it would just completely tear him in half, because there's a limit to the amount of power he can receive and tune down. Now, in Takaba's case, is there an upper limit that could be destroyed by Kenjaku? Does Kenjaku have an attack strong enough to where even Takaba's funny durability wouldn't be enough to handle it? I'm just going to say outright right now, I don't think there is a single attack Kenjaku has that would be able to negate Takaba's durability ability. And the reason I say this is because it stated that his technique can oppose Gojo. Now every definition of oppose that I see, it basically means to challenge or meet with some relative or equal amount of force or able to compete with. So if Gege is outright saying that Takaba would be able to compete with Gojo in a given circumstance, then that means that Takaba would be able to compete with Gojo's attacks. And these attacks mainly Gojo uses are red, blue, and purple. So if Takaba would be able to compete or oppose Gojo using purple, then undoubtedly he would be able to compete with Kenjaku using curse manipulation or Kenjaku using gravity. So although I do believe there is some upper limit to Takaba's ability, if he can handle Gojo and compete or oppose Gojo, and Gojo is much stronger than Kenjaku, there is no way that Kenjaku's curse manipulation should be able to tear Takaba apart as long as he's using his funny durability. And it's funny because I keep saying funny durability, but that is basically the best way to word Takaba's durability whenever he's using his comedian technique. He's constantly in these fights taking no damage, so I think it would just be good to say funny durability, because it's not actual durability that he's displaying, it's through the use of this technique that he is able to take no damage. Which means now we need to talk about what I said I would talk about earlier in the video, and that is what would happen if Kenjaku decides to expand his domain expansion. And this is very tricky because, as Kenjaku said in chapter 82, domain expansions negate or cancel out curse techniques, which means if this rule still applies in this fight with Takaba, the moment Kenjaku expands his domain expansion on Takaba, his comedian technique would go away and Takaba will be susceptible to attacks from Kenjaku. Now in this scenario, I do think the only way I can see Takaba living if Kenjaku wants to expand his domain is for Takaba to find somehow, some way it funny for Kenjaku not to be able to expand his domain expansion. If Kenjaku can't get his domain expansion wrapped around Takaba, I do think that this rule of not being able to use your curse technique inside domains will still apply and Takaba will be fully vulnerable to Kenjaku. But if Takaba can somehow find it funny for Kenjaku to not use his hands to make the hand side or anything like that, I think Takaba has a good chance at not winning this fight. I don't see Takaba beating and killing Kenjaku, but I do see Takaba surviving long enough for others to arrive. And I do think that the person who will probably arrive at the end of this fight will be Yuta Okotsu. And just as ending this video off, I do want to say, if Yuta doesn't pull up to this fight whatsoever, I wouldn't call Yuta a fraud, even though I've seen a lot of people calling Yuta a fraud. I would say that we need to see what this insurance is that Maki and Hikari keep referencing, because we know that Yuta is supposed to be insurance for the team. And although we don't know what it is yet, it better be something good because Yuta has not hopped in a single fight yet. You know, we see Higuruma and Yuji going to fight Sukuna, and we see Takaba going to fight Kenjaku. If this insurance truly is something that is game changing, then I think that Yuta gets a pass for not fighting yet. But if this insurance is not something game changing, then yeah, I think Yuta needs to get his butt out there and fight. And with that being said, I want to thank you so much for reaching the end of the video, and if you enjoyed, then I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I do post on different topics that you guys give me and a few that I come up with on my own. Thank you so much for watching. See you guys next time.